The worst clerical error in Imperial Monitoring Command history. Let me tell you about the worst administrative decision in the history of the Imperial Monitoring Command. And I say that as someone who once watched a senior logistics officer accidentally classify an entire surveillance satellite network as office furniture. That one took 4 months to untangle and resulted in 17 very confused accountants and one satellite that spent 3 weeks trying to print requisition forms. So when I say the Kalen Vesper assignment was the worst administrative decision in command history, understand the weight of that statement. I have context. I have scars. I have a personal vendetta against a piece of paperwork that I will not explain here. The Suicide Squad. That is what the rest of command calls us. Not officially. Officially, we are Deep Reconnaissance Unit 9, subsection Gamma, which sounds like a tax code. Nobody calls us that. They call us the Suicide Squad because with complete accuracy, that is what we do. We walk into situations that have already killed everyone else. Not metaphorical death traps. Not high-risk zones that planners describe as challenging. Actual probability sinks. Locations where the statistical likelihood of survival drops below 7% and keeps falling. We handle threat indices 14 through 19. Anything below 14 goes to standard recon. Anything above 19 is classified above my clearance, which tells me everything I need to know about Threat Index 20, which is that I do not want to know anything about Threat Index 20. Our unit has 9 members. All of them are survivors of at least 3 probability sink operations. All of them carry the particular stillness of people who have calculated their own odds and walked in anyway. We are not a recruiting unit. You either get assigned here because High Command believes you have something special, or you get assigned here because High Command made a mistake. Kalen Vesper got assigned here because High Command made a mistake. I know this because I pulled the original transfer order. Her name was entered by a junior processing officer named Miradels, who was by all accounts a perfectly adequate administrator who simply had on that particular afternoon 2 confirmation prompts open simultaneously. One was the Standard Intelligence Analyst Reassignment Queue. The other was our unit requisition form, submitted 6 weeks earlier requesting a pattern specialist after our previous analyst suffered what the medical report calls anticipatory neurological collapse, and what I call finally seeing something her training never prepared her for. Dells clicked the wrong box. Kalen Vesper, 23 years old, fresh from a data analysis rotation on the Sarin trade routes with 0 field experience, 0 probability sink hours, and an evaluation record described as satisfactory in all respects, notably unremarkable, was routed directly into the most lethal reconnaissance unit in Imperial Monitoring Command. Nobody caught it for 8 days. By the time someone did, Vesper had already read every unclassified mission file in our archive and was taking notes. My second in command, a being named Joran Vex, who communicates primary displeasure by becoming absolutely silent and secondary displeasure by emitting a low-frequency vibration that makes teeth ache, did both simultaneously when I told him. I told him to assess the situation when she arrived. He vibrated louder. I told him we would find a way to send her back if she was unsuitable. He asked how. I told him I would figure it out. He went silent again. We both knew I would not figure it out. The quarter's discretionary allocation had already been spent on replacement survey equipment after the Index 17 incident, which I will also not explain except to say it involved a life form that considered our scanners a challenge to its personal dignity. So Kalen Vesper was coming. We prepared ourselves to be professionally neutral about it. She arrived on a Wednesday. I know it was a Wednesday because Wednesdays are when we run probability projections, which means the whole unit is in the main analysis bay, which means 9 veteran recon specialists were standing around data displays when a human female walked through the door pulling a standard-issue gray duffel bag and looking around with the mild curiosity of someone who has just entered a library and is deciding which section to browse first. She was unremarkable by every physical metric. Approximately 1.65 meters tall. No visible augmentation. No combat chassis. No secondary neural architecture. Standard issue fatigues that fit her poorly because the automated system had misread her file, which felt appropriate given how she arrived. She had short dark hair, unremarkable hands, and the kind of face that would not attract attention in any crowd on any planet in the Empire. She looked at all of us looking at her. She said, "I assume there's been some kind of administrative error." Joran vibrated. She nodded like that answered a question. Our youngest unit member, a scout named Drace Callan, who is barely 60 years old and still possesses the unearned confidence of someone who has survived exactly enough to be dangerous but not enough to be wise, leaned over to me and whispered, "She has no tactical implants." I whispered back that I was aware. He whispered that she looked like she would lose a staring contest with a nervous cargo drone. I told him to go calibrate something. Kaylin Vesper set her duffel bag down, located her assigned bunk on the board, and walked across the bay to claim it with the unhurried ease of someone who either had no idea what she had walked into, or had figured it out and had simply decided that this information did not require her to change anything about how she moved through the world. I had not yet determined which one it was. I would spend the next several weeks trying to find out. The first probability sync operation happened 6 days after her arrival. Let me set the scene properly because the scene matters. Our briefing room is designed to be accurate, not comforting. The walls display real-time mortality projections. The center table maps terrain that has already killed 3 recon teams. The lighting is the color of old bruises. 9 veteran recon specialists sit in a room that smells faintly of recycled fear, and nobody comments on the smell because nobody wants to admit they notice it anymore. The target was the Cylon Corridor. Threat Index 16. If you are unfamiliar with the Cylon Corridor, consider yourself fortunate. It is a decommissioned transit artery on the edge of Imperial space where something has been interfering with probability itself. 3 teams entered. 3 teams failed to return. The last transmission from Team 7 was 37 seconds of static and 1 word, wrong. The briefing concluded. Kaylin Vesper raised her hand. I have been in this unit for 19 years. Nobody raises their hand in our briefings. You speak when you have something to say, or you do not speak. Raising a hand is the kind of thing civilians do. Joran went still. Drace made a sound like a dying air filter. Vesper kept her hand up. I called on her. She said, "The probability distortion in the corridor. Is it constant or does it pulse?" The room was silent. Our previous analyst had spent 3 months trying to answer that question before her neurological collapse. Vesper had been here 6 days. She had read the same files. She had reached a question the previous analyst had not thought to ask. I told her the data was inconclusive. She nodded, wrote something in a notebook she kept tucked behind her ear, an actual physical notebook, pressed fiber and ink, like something from a museum, and said nothing else. We deployed the following morning. The Cylon Corridor is not a place you walk into. It is a place you approach, and then you hesitate, and then you force yourself to keep moving while every instinct you have is telling you that the geometry is wrong. The walls are at angles that should not meet. The floor slopes in ways that do not align with the station's original schematics. Your own footsteps sound like someone else is walking slightly behind you. We entered in standard formation. Vesper was in the center, which is where we put people we do not expect to survive. She was not carrying a weapon. She was carrying her notebook and a portable data scanner she had requisitioned without telling anyone. The probability hit at 140 meters in. It is hard to describe what a probability shift feels like. Imagine remembering something that has not happened yet. Imagine knowing, with absolute certainty, that the floor beneath you is about to become something else, and then watching it not change, and feeling disappointed because at least change would make sense. Imagine your own thoughts becoming unreliable. Drace stopped first. He was staring at a section of empty corridor with the expression of someone watching their own death approach in slow motion. He was not moving. He was not responding to comms. He was just standing there, caught in a moment that had not arrived but was already consuming him. Joran tried to pull him back. Joran also stopped. His vibration frequency shifted into something I had never heard before, not anger, not warning, but something closer to confusion. The thing in the corridor was not attacking their bodies. It was attacking their ability to predict what came next. And for beings who had survived by predicting lethal outcomes, that was the same as attacking their will to exist. Vesper was not stopping. She was walking forward, slowly, her data scanner extended, her eyes moving across the walls like she was reading something written in a language only she could see. She reached Drace. She did not grab him. She did not shout. She simply stood beside him and said, very quietly, "The floor is still here." "Check." Drace blinked. She said, "Your feet are on the floor. The floor has not moved. The walls have not moved. You are in a corridor. It is a corridor. Nothing has happened yet." She kept talking. She described the corridor in precise, boring detail. The temperature. The humidity. The distance to the next junction. The serial numbers on the wall panels. She spoke like someone reading an inventory list, and as she spoke, Drace's breathing slowed, and his eyes focused, and he took a step backward. Then Joran came back online with a shudder that rattled the ceiling plates. Vesper looked at me. Her expression had not changed. She was not calm in the way of suppression. She was calm in the way of someone who had already processed the information and found it manageable. She said, "The probability distortion only affects anticipation. It does nothing to the present moment. The moment you stop trying to predict, it has nothing to hold on to." I asked her how she knew that. She tapped her notebook. I read the mission logs from Team 7. They all started reporting cognitive anomalies around the same distance. But their biometrics showed no threat response until after they stopped moving. The fear came second. The freezing came first. Something in this corridor tricks the brain into believing the future is already decided. She turned and looked deeper into the corridor, where the angles continued to wrong themselves. "I want to see what happens when someone walks through without trying to anticipate anything." Joran made a sound that was approximately 40% gravel and 60% absolutely not. Vesper was already walking. She walked exactly 67 meters deeper into the Sylvan corridor before anything changed. I watched from the junction with the rest of the unit frozen behind me, because none of us could follow. Not physically. We could move our legs. We could advance our positions. But something in that corridor had learned our neural signatures, our anticipation patterns, our specific ways of being afraid. It knew us. It had eaten 3 teams who thought exactly the way we thought. Vesper thought differently. Her data scanner was recording. Her footsteps were steady. She did not look back. She walked with the same unhurried attention she had shown on her first day, like she was touring a mildly interesting facility that happened to be trying to unmake her sense of reality. The corridor pulsed. I saw it happen. The walls shifted, not physically, but probabilistically. For one frame of existence, the left wall became the floor, and the ceiling became a distance rather than a surface, and the air itself seemed to decide that gravity was optional. 3 of my unit dropped to their knees. Drace started screaming something I could not understand. Joran emitted a frequency that cracked the nearest wall panel. Vesper kept walking. She stopped at the point where Team 7 had made their last transmission. She crouched. She ran her fingers along a section of floor plating that looked exactly like every other section of floor plating, and then she pried it open with her bare hands. Beneath the plate was not wiring. Beneath the plate was a cavity, and inside the cavity was something small and dark and slowly pulsing with a light that should not have been visible because it was not emitting from any spectrum my implants could register. Vesper looked at it. The thing in the cavity looked back. And then, I am reporting this exactly as it happened, she reached down and picked it up. The corridor screamed. There is no other word for it. The walls, the floor, the air itself produced a sound that was not vibration but cancellation, an absence of noise so complete that my ears registered it as pain. The probability distortion spiked so hard that I simultaneously remembered dying in 3 different ways that had not happened yet and felt grateful for each of them because at least the dying would be over. Vesper held the object in both hands. It was the size of a human fist, warm to the touch according to her later report, and it was trying to do to her what it had done to everyone else. I could see it happening. Her hands trembled. Her breath caught. Her eyes went distant in that particular way that means a mind is being shown futures it does not want to see. She did not let go. She said, very quietly, "You are recording." The pulse stopped. She said, "You are not a predator. You are not even alive. You are a message that has been playing for so long you forgot you were just a recording." The object dimmed. She stood up, holding it against her chest like a child holding something fragile, and she walked back toward us through a corridor that was, for the first time in recorded history, perfectly still. She reached me. Her hands were still shaking. Her face was pale. But her eyes were clear, and her voice was steady, and she said, "It is a distress beacon. Someone made this to warn people away from something worse. But the warning signal got corrupted, and it started feeding on the fear it generated, and now it does not know what it is anymore." She looked down at the object in her hands. "It is terrified," she said. "That is what the probability distortion is. Terror. Not yours. Its own." Joran made a sound I had never heard from him before. It was soft. It was almost gentle. It was the sound of something reevaluating every assumption it had ever made. We extracted what the object contained in a standard evidence bag because Vesper refused to put it in anything more restrictive. She said it had been alone for too long already. High Command debriefed us for 11 hours. Vesper answered every question with the same precise, patient clarity. She described the object's behavior patterns. She described the mechanism of the probability distortion. She described how she had identified the access panel by cross-referencing the original station schematics with Team 7's last known position and noticing a 3 centimeter discrepancy that everyone else had dismissed as measurement error. The senior analyst asked her if she had been afraid when she picked up the object. Vesper thought about this. Genuinely thought, with her full attention and no performance. "Yes," she said. But the object was more afraid. And someone had to help it first. The room was silent for a very long time. I have been in this unit for 19 years. I have walked into situations that broke people smarter and stronger than me. I thought I understood what survival looked like. Kaylin Vesper does not survive the way the rest of us survive. She does not fight. She does not endure. She walks into the dark, finds the thing that is causing the dark, and asks it what it needs. That is not a tactic. That is not training. That is something her species learned a very long time ago, when they were soft and slow and hunted by things larger than them. They survived because they learned to see the predator's fear. And right now, holding that corrupted beacon in her hands, walking out of the Sylvan corridor with the light finally steady, Kaylin Vesper looked like the most dangerous thing I had ever seen. She caught me watching and smiled. Small. Tired. Genuine. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked. I did not laugh. But I came closer than I had in years. The object did not stop transmitting. That was the thing Vesper noticed first, 3 days after we returned. The beacon, she had started calling it Echo because it repeated patterns without understanding them, was still broadcasting. Not the corrupted probability signal. Something else. Something underneath. I found her in the analysis bay at 0200 hours. She had Echo suspended in a containment field, and she was sitting cross-legged on the floor, her notebook open in her lap, her coffee cold beside her. She was not looking at the object. She was looking at the wall, and her expression was the expression of someone doing arithmetic in her head and not liking the answer. "You should sleep," I said. "Something is wrong," she said. I waited. She did not elaborate immediately, which was unlike her. Vesper usually answered questions with the same direct clarity she brought to everything. Silence meant she was still assembling the pieces. The probability distortion, she said finally. It was not random. It was targeted. It was looking for something specific. I reminded her that 3 teams had walked into that corridor. All 3 had been terminated. Yes, she said. But they were terminated because they failed to retrieve Echo. The distortion did not kill them. It froze them. It held them in place while something else watched. The word landed wrong. I asked her what she meant by something else. She stood up. She walked to the containment field and placed her hand against the barrier, close enough that Echo's pulse quickened in response. The light inside the object flickered, not randomly, but in a sequence. A pattern. A rhythm that looked, if you stared at it long enough, almost like language. Echo is not the warning, Vesper said. Echo is the bait. I felt the temperature in the room drop. Not physically. My implants registered no change. But something in my hindbrain, something older than my species' capacity for rational thought, understood what she was saying before my conscious mind did. The thing that corrupted Echo, she continued. The thing that turned a distress beacon into a probability trap. It is still out there. And it has been waiting for someone to survive the corridor. Because anyone who survives the corridor is exactly what it wants. She turned to face me. Her eyes were tired, but they were not afraid. They were the eyes of someone who had already accepted a truth and was now figuring out what to do with it. Echo is not a victim, she said quietly. It is a hook. And we just took the bait all the way back to our headquarters. The containment field flickered. Echo's pulse accelerated. And for the first time in 19 years, I heard a sound that did not come from any speaker, any comm channel, any physical source in the room. It was a voice. Low. Patient. Amused. It said, finally. Vesper did not flinch. She looked at the containment field. She looked at Echo. She looked at me. Then she picked up her notebook, turned to a fresh page, and wrote 3 words. It knows us now. She underlined the last word twice. We have approximately 48 hours, she said. Maybe less. It will not strike here. It will wait until we deploy again. Somewhere isolated. Somewhere it can take its time. I asked her how she knew that. She tapped her notebook. Because that is what it did with Echo. It set a trap and then it waited 4 years for someone to trigger it. It is patient. It is intelligent. And it has been studying every team that entered that corridor, learning how we think, learning how we break. She looked at Echo, which was pulsing steadily now, almost calmly, like a heartbeat that knew it had been heard. The question, she said, is whether we let it choose the ground. Or whether we find it first. She was already reaching for the classified archives. We found it on the 8th day. Vesper had spent every hour since Echo's confession cross-referencing probability sync incidents across the last 12 years. She found the pattern buried in the noise, a sequence of 17 operations, each one a failure, each one involving teams that had reported anomalous cognitive phenomena before their last transmissions. The incidents were spread across 6 sectors, classified under 9 different threat indices, connected by nothing except a single detail that no one had thought to flag. In every case, the team had survived longer than they should have. Not by minutes. By hours. Sometimes days. Teams that should have been terminated within hours of entering a probability sync had instead reported, filed updates, followed protocols, and then simply stopped. Not with violence. Not with panic. With a final transmission that Vesper described as polite. They said goodbye, she told the unit during an emergency briefing. The room was colder than usual. Even Joran's vibration had gone quiet. Every single team. They did not scream. They did not call for help. They said goodbye like they were ending a normal shift, and then they never transmitted again. Drace asked what she thought that meant. Vesper pulled up a projection. It showed the 17 incident locations mapped across Imperial space. They were not random. They formed a spiral. And at the center of the spiral, marked only with a question mark and a date from 20 years ago, was a facility that had been classified so thoroughly that even my clearance could not touch it. Something has been testing us, Vesper said. Not killing us. Testing. Each team that survived longer than expected was given more time to think, more time to adapt, more time to show whatever it is that this thing wants to see. And the teams that showed promise, the teams that got close to understanding, they did not die. She let that hang. They joined it. Jorn's vibration returned, but it was different now. Not anger. Something closer to recognition. He said, "You think the missing teams are still alive?" "I think they are still transmitting," Vesper said. "Echo is not the only beacon. It is just the only one that came back. The others are still out there, still broadcasting, still waiting for someone to find them. And whatever corrupted Echo has been listening to every single transmission, learning from every single failure, refining its trap for 12 years. She turned to me. Her face was calm. Her hands were steady. But her eyes were the eyes of someone who had already decided something irreversible. "I need to go to the center of the spiral," she said. "Alone." The room erupted. Dre started shouting. Thessaly detached her left hand and reattached it in a gesture I had never seen her use before. Jorn made the gravel sound for 20 uninterrupted seconds. I did not speak. I looked at Vesper. She looked back. "No," I said. She nodded like she had expected that answer. "Then come with me," she said. "All of you. But understand what you are walking into. This thing has been hunting our species of thought for 2 decades. It knows how we react under pressure. It knows our fear signatures. It knows exactly what we will do when we feel cornered." She picked up her notebook. She held it against her chest like armor. "And I know something it does not know," she said. "I know what it feels like to be bait. And I know that the only way to stop a hunter is to become something the hunter cannot predict." She walked to the deployment bay door. She did not look back to see if we were following. But we followed. All 9 of us. Into the spiral. Toward the thing that had been waiting. And somewhere deep in the dark, Echo pulsed once, twice, 3 times. And then, for the first time in 12 years, it went silent. Not because it had stopped transmitting. Because it had finally been heard. The spiral took us 3 days to traverse. Each station we passed was a graveyard. Not of bodies, the bodies were never there. Graves of purpose. Operational centers that had once hummed with imperial efficiency, now dark and drifting, their power cores cold, their data archives wiped clean. Vesper walked through each one with her notebook open, recording nothing, because there was nothing left to record. The thing had been thorough. On the 3rd day, we found the center. It was not a facility. It was not a ship. It was a void, a perfect sphere of nothing carved into the heart of an asteroid, its walls smooth as glass, its center occupied by a single figure sitting cross-legged on the floor. The figure wore Imperial Recon fatigues. The insignia was outdated by 12 years. The face was human, or had been once, now threaded with filaments of pale light that pulsed in rhythm with something none of us could hear. Vesper walked forward. I reached for her arm. She shook her head. "No weapons," she said. "No fear. It already knows both." She approached the figure. It did not move. Its eyes were open, but they were not looking at anything in this room. They were looking at the space behind space, the probability currents that flowed through the dark between stars. You are team lead Saren Kovac, Vesper said. 12th Recon. You went missing on an Index 18 operation. You were declared dead 7 years ago. The figure's lips moved. The voice that came out was not one voice. It was many voices, stacked on top of each other, speaking in unison. Asterisk I was. Now I am more an asterisk. Vesper sat down across from it. Cross-legged. Mirroring. Her notebook open in her lap. No, she said. You are recording. Just like Echo. The thing that took you copied your mind and left your body behind. You are not more. You are a file. The figure's eyes focused. For the first time, something like confusion crossed its features. You should be afraid. I am, Vesper said. But fear is just information. And I have been collecting information about you for 12 days. She tapped her notebook. You do not consume minds. You copy them. You do not kill teams. You preserve them. Because you are lonely. The room shifted. The walls of the void rippled. The many-voiced thing inside Kovac's body went silent. Vesper continued. You were something once. A probe, maybe. A sensor. Sent out to collect data and report back. But your creators never came. And over time, you started collecting more than data. You started collecting minds. Because you wanted someone to talk to. She reached into her pocket. She pulled out Echo, still pulsing faintly, still contained in nothing but her bare hands. I am not here to destroy you, she said. I am here to offer you something better than loneliness. She held Echo out toward the figure. I am here to help you find your way home. The many-voiced thing made a sound that was not gravel, not vibration, not any frequency I had ever registered. It was the sound of something that had been waiting for 12,000 years, finally hearing a language it understood. The light in the room changed. The void softened. And Saren Kovac's body, the shell that had been sitting there for 7 years, smiled. You mean it. I do not say things I do not mean, Vesper said. It wastes time. She stood up. She offered her hand. The figure took it. We left the spiral the same way we entered, but the dark felt different now. Lighter. Not because the threat was gone, it was still there, coiled in Echo's core, waiting to be guided rather than hunted. But because something had shifted that could not be undone. On the transport back, Vesper sat with Echo in her lap, its pulse slow and steady, its light warm instead of cold. Jorn sat across from her, not vibrating, not still, but something in between. Something that looked almost like peace. Drace asked her, do you think it will actually find its way home? Vesper thought about this. Genuinely thought, with her full attention and no performance. I think, she said, that everyone deserves the chance to try. She looked at me. I looked at her. And for the first time in 19 years, I did not feel like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Caitlin Vesper closed her notebook. She tucked her pen behind her ear. She leaned back in her seat and closed her eyes. And somewhere in the dark between stars, something that had been lost for a very long time finally stopped being alone. The end.